They ruled the galaxy until they crossed a human border. The first rule of galactic conquest is simple: never underestimate your prey. The Korathani Empire had forgotten this rule after 3,000 years of absolute dominance across 47 star systems. They ruled with surgical precision, crushing resistance before it could form, enslaving species with methods so refined that most victims thanked them for the privilege. They called themselves the Eternal Dominion. Their ships moved like silver death through the void. Their warriors stood 8 feet tall with crystalline armor that could deflect plasma fire, and their minds operated on frequencies that could break lesser species with a thought. They had conquered the warrior clans of Vorthak, dissolved the hive mind of the Zephyrian collective, and turned the once proud Nexari into willing servants who built monuments to their own subjugation. But they had never encountered humanity. Captain Alex Kozlov of the US Defiant didn't know he was about to make galactic history. When his Deep Space Patrol picked up the distress signal, the transmission was garbled, fragmented, but the Universal Translator caught enough to make his blood run cold. "They came from nowhere," the voice crackled through static. 17 colonies, gone. They don't negotiate. They don't demand surrender. They just correct us. The signal cut to silence. "Nav, get me a trajectory on that transmission," Kozlov ordered, his weathered face tight with concern. At 52, he'd spent half his life patrolling the Outer Rim, protecting human settlements from pirates and natural disasters. He'd never encountered hostile aliens. Hell, most of humanity still debated whether intelligent alien life existed. "Signal originated from the Kepler 442 system, sir. 3 days out at maximum burn," replied Lieutenant Diana Voss, her fingers dancing across the navigation console. Fresh out of the academy, she still believed in regulations and proper procedure. The Outer Rim would change that soon enough. "Sir," interrupted Communications Officer Ravi Patel, his voice strained, "I'm picking up 17 more distress calls, all from systems along our border, all saying the same thing." Kozlov felt ice form in his stomach. 17 systems. That wasn't a raid or a rogue fleet, that was an invasion. "Wake the crew, battle stations, send a priority flash to Earth Command. First contact situation, hostile intent confirmed. We are investigating." The Defiant was a Ranger-class frigate designed for long-range patrol and emergency response. She wasn't built for war, but her crew was skilled, experienced, and stubborn. As they approached the Kepler 442 system, what they found would haunt Kozlov for the rest of his life. The colonies were intact. That was the first horror. No debris fields, no scorched planets, no signs of battle. The city still functioned, power grids hummed, atmospheric processors continued their work, but the people had changed. "Sir, I'm receiving a hail from the primary colony," Patel reported, his voice barely steady. It's Governor Martinez. But something's wrong with the signal." The view screen flickered to life. Governor Martinez sat at his desk, looking perfectly normal except for his eyes. They were wrong. Too bright, too still, like someone had replaced them with polished stones. "Welcome, Captain Kozlov," Martinez said, his voice carrying an odd harmonic resonance. "We have been expecting you. The Korathani wish to extend an invitation for discussion." "Governor, what's your status? We received distress calls from your system." Martinez tilted his head at an unnatural angle. "Distress? No, Captain. We have been corrected. The inefficiencies of human governance have been resolved. You should join us. The process is quite painless." The transmission cut abruptly. "Get us out of here," Kozlov whispered. "Now." As the Defiant retreated, they were pursued by ships unlike anything in human databases. Silver and flowing, they moved without visible propulsion, changing direction with physics-defying grace. The vessels didn't fire on them, merely followed, as if studying their movements. "They're scanning us," reported Chief Engineer Yuki Tanaka, her hands flying over her console. "Some kind of neural pattern analysis. They're mapping our brain functions. Can you block it?" "Working on it, sir, but their technology it's like nothing we've ever seen. They're not just reading our electronics, they're reading us." The pursuit lasted 6 hours. When they finally lost the alien ships at the edge of the system, half the crew was suffering from severe headaches. and 3 officers had begun speaking in the same harmonic tones as Governor Martinez. The journey back to Earth took 2 weeks. 2 weeks of quarantine protocols, psychological evaluations, and endless debriefings. When they finally arrived, Earth's military command was in chaos. 43 systems in 2 weeks, Admiral Sarah Chen briefed the emergency council. The Korathani aren't just conquering territory, they're converting entire populations. Our intelligence suggests they're using some form of advanced neural manipulation. Kozlov sat in the briefing room, still haunted by Martinez's empty eyes. Admiral, they don't just change minds. They rewrite them completely. The people we saw, they weren't human anymore. And they're heading directly for Sol System, Chen continued. Our xenobiology teams estimate we have perhaps 6 months before they reach Earth. The room fell silent. 6 months to prepare for an enemy they didn't understand, using technology they couldn't comprehend. What are our options? Asked Director Kumar of Colonial Defense. Fight or surrender, Chen replied grimly. And based on what we've seen, surrender just means a slower death. That's when Dr. Amara Okafor spoke up. A neuroscientist from the Lagos Institute, she'd been studying the brain scans of the affected crew members. There might be a third option, she said quietly. The neural manipulation they use, it has a weakness. It requires the subject to be in a specific brainwave state, highly focused, calm, receptive. But human brains under extreme stress, flooded with adrenaline and chaotic emotions, they become essentially unreadable. You're suggesting we stay terrified for 6 months? Chen asked skeptically. No, Admiral. I'm suggesting we become something they've never encountered before. Every species they've conquered has been logical, hierarchical, predictable. Humans are none of those things. We're chaotic, emotional, irrational. We make terrible decisions for good reasons and brilliant decisions for terrible reasons. We're completely insane by galactic standards. General Marcus Webb, a grizzled veteran of the colonial wars, leaned forward. What are you proposing, Doctor? We don't fight them like a traditional military force. We fight them like humans. Unpredictably, irrationally, with maximum chaos and minimum sense. We become the enemy they can't understand. And so began the most unusual military strategy in human history. Operation Pandemonium was everything traditional warfare was not. Instead of unified command structures, Earth created dozens of independent cells, each operating with different objectives and methods. Instead of standardized equipment, they encouraged improvisation and creativity. Instead of discipline and order, they fostered controlled chaos. The first Korathani fleet arrived at the edge of Sol System 7 months later. 12 massive vessels, each one capable of sterilizing a planet. They sent the standard ultimatum: surrender and be corrected, or resist and be eliminated. Earth's response was a transmission of pure human insanity. Death metal music mixed with poetry, mathematical equations solved incorrectly on purpose, and a video of cats playing piano. The Korathani spent 3 days trying to decode the meaning before giving up and proceeding with the invasion. They expected orbital bombardment or desperate fleet actions. What they got was Lieutenant Commander Riley Nakamura's engineering team launching modified waste disposal units filled with glitter and industrial adhesive at their ships. The Korathani vessels, built for precision and perfection, found their sensor arrays clogged with sparkly debris. While they were clearing their sensors, Commander Torres led a squadron of converted mining ships in a ramming attack that violated every principle of naval warfare. Instead of targeting weapons or engines, they aimed for what appeared to be decorative elements on the alien hulls. The Korathani couldn't understand why humans would sacrifice themselves for cosmetic damage. Except the decorative elements were actually neural transmission arrays, and the humans had studied the wreckage from their first encounter very carefully. As the Korathani fleet struggled with communications failures and sensor blindness, Captain Valdez's Marines launched boarding actions using modified escape pods. But instead of trying to capture vital areas, they scattered throughout the ships, spreading human-manufactured chaos. Sergeant Major Kim Park's team released Earth insects in the life support systems. The Korathani, who had never encountered creatures that served no logical purpose other than to annoy, were baffled by flies and mosquitoes. Their perfect environmental controls couldn't eliminate pests that thrived on imperfection. Meanwhile, Corporal Zhang's squad was busy reprogramming Korathani systems using human logic. Where the aliens expected binary efficiency, the humans introduced random elements. Elevators that occasionally played music, lights that flickered in rhythm with human heartbeats, doors that required pleasantries to open. The psychological effect was devastating. The Korathani had conquered through certainty, through absolute control and predictable outcomes. Humans introduced chaos theory to their perfect order, and their neural patterns couldn't adapt. But the real breakthrough came when Dr. Okafor's daughter, 16-year-old Kira, hacked into the Korathani neural network using a gaming console and sheer teenage spite. "They're all connected," she explained excitedly to the adults who couldn't understand her methods. "Like, literally connected. Same thoughts, same patterns, same boring perfection. So I just introduced some chaos subroutines. Memes, basically. Viral thoughts that their brains can't process properly." Within hours, Korathani soldiers were stopping mid-battle to contemplate whether a hot dog was a sandwich. Their perfect unity dissolved into philosophical debates and existential crises. The invasion fleet retreated after 6 days, not because they were defeated, but because they were confused. For the first time in 3,000 years, the Korathani Empire faced an enemy that didn't make sense. The second wave came 8 months later. This time, they were prepared for human irrationality. They'd studied human culture, analyzed battle patterns, developed countermeasures for chaos. They hadn't counted on humanity's ability to evolve. The new strategy was developed by a joint task force led by Commander Isabella Romano, a former intelligence officer with a degree in xenopsychology and a talent for thinking like the enemy. "They've adapted to our chaos," she explained at the strategy briefing. "So we give them order. Perfect, logical, predictable order. Then we use that against them." The second battle was everything the first wasn't. Human forces moved with precision, followed textbook tactics, responded predictably to every Korathani move. The alien commanders relaxed, confident they understood their enemy now. That's when the trap sprung, so every predictable human response was actually setting up a larger pattern. A massive coordinated strike that used the Korathani's own logical thinking against them. When they moved to counter what they thought was a standard flanking maneuver, they walked directly into a kill zone. When they attempted to exploit what appeared to be a tactical weakness, they found themselves surrounded by forces that had never actually retreated, merely repositioned according to a plan they couldn't see. The Korathani were masters of warfare, but warfare had rules. Humans, it turned out, were masters of breaking rules while appearing to follow them. Admiral Torres delivered the killing blow from the US Indomitable, humanity's first purpose-built warship. As the Korathani flagship tried to retreat, she opened a channel to their commander. "You made one mistake," she said, her voice carrying across the void. "You assumed we'd fight like every other species you've conquered, but we're not every other species. We're human, and we don't lose." The Korathani fleet jumped to hyperspace, leaving behind damaged ships and wounded pride. But humanity wasn't done. "They'll be back," Admiral Chen warned the United Earth Council. "Stronger, better prepared, more dangerous. We've shown them we can resist, which makes us a threat to their entire empire." "Then we don't wait for them," replied President Jackson Owe, a former colonial governor who understood the Outer Rim mentality. "We take the fight to them. Sir, with respect, we barely survived 2 engagements. We're talking about an empire that spans 47 star systems. Exactly. 47 systems full of conquered species who've never seen their masters bleed. What do you think happens when we show the galaxy that the Korathani can be beaten?" And so began humanity's strangest export: revolution. The first to answer the call were the Nexari, a species of natural engineers who had been enslaved for 800 years. When human ships arrived in their system, broadcasting messages of hope and rebellion, the response was immediate. "We remember," transmitted Nexari resistance leader Vexitar. "We remember freedom. Will you teach us to fight?" Commander Romano, now leading humanity's new Liberator fleet, smiled grimly. "We'll do better than that. We'll teach you to think like humans." The Nexari took to human chaos theory like fish to water. Their engineering brilliance, combined with human unpredictability, created weapons and tactics the Korathani had never encountered. Gravity bombs that sang opera while they detonated. Ships that looked like debris but moved like fighters. Boarding parties that attacked through the ventilation systems while reciting poetry. The revolution spread. The Vorthak warrior clans remembered their honor and rose against their oppressors. The fragmented Zephyrian collective reformed as a chaotic network of independent minds, sharing only their hatred of tyranny. Each liberated world became a recruiting ground. Each freed species brought new advantages. The Korathani Empire, built on the assumption of permanent superiority, began to crumble from within. The final battle came at Korath Prime, the Empire's homeworld. Humanity arrived not with the largest fleet, but with the most diverse one. Ships crewed by a dozen different species, each contributing their unique strengths to the human chaos doctrine. Emperor Vorthak of the Korathani, a being so ancient he remembered the Empire's founding, finally agreed to face the human leadership directly. "You have cost us much." His synthesized voice resonated through the communication array. "But you cannot destroy us. We are eternal. We are perfection." Admiral Chen, now commanding the Combined Liberation Fleet, looked at the screen showing billions of beings across dozens of worlds, all waiting for her response. "You're wrong about one thing," she said calmly. "You're not eternal. Nothing is. But you're especially not eternal because you forgot the first rule of existence. Adapt or die. You've been the same for 3,000 years. We've been changing since we first looked up at the stars." "Your chaos cannot last," Vorthak replied. "Order always prevails." "Maybe, but not your order, and not today." The battle for Korath Prime lasted 14 hours. The Korathani fought with the desperate fury of a perfect system facing extinction. But perfection, it turned out, was brittle. When it broke, it shattered completely. The war ended not with conquest, but with choice. The Korathani survivors were offered the same option they had given their victims: change or exile. Most chose exile, disappearing into the Outer Rim with their remaining ships. Some chose to stay, to learn what they had spent millennia destroying. Emperor Vorthak chose differently. In a final transmission, he spoke directly to humanity. "You have taught us that perfection is a cage. We built an empire on the belief that order was supreme, that chaos was weakness. But you turned chaos into strength, disorder into victory. You are either the greatest species in the galaxy, or the most dangerous. Perhaps both." The transmission ended, and the Korathani homeworld fell silent. In the aftermath, as species across the galaxy began rebuilding their shattered worlds, the question arose: what now? Humanity had united the galaxy in rebellion, but revolutions were easier than governance. The answer came from an unexpected source. The humans themselves decided they didn't want to rule. "We didn't fight to become the new overlords." President Owe addressed the Galactic Liberation Council. "We fought because nobody should be overlords. Every species deserves the right to chart their own course, make their own mistakes, find their own path." And so the Galactic Republic was born, not as an empire, but as a loose confederation of independent worlds, united only by the principle that no one species should dominate another. It was messy, inefficient, and perfectly human. Years later, as Admiral Chen retired to a small colony world on the Outer Rim, she was visited by a Korathani refugee named Kethvan. Unlike his former brethren, he had adapted to human chaos, even embraced it. "I have a question," he said, his synthesized voice carrying new harmonics that suggested curiosity rather than superiority. "Why did you spare us? Your species has every reason to hate us." Chen looked up at the stars, the same stars that had once carried Korathani warships to human worlds. "Because hatred is just another form of order," she said finally, "and we're really, really good at breaking order." Kethvan processed this for a long moment. "Your species is confusing." "That's the point," Chen smiled. "The moment someone thinks they understand us completely, we do something they don't expect. It's kept us alive this long." "And it nearly destroyed the galaxy." "No," Chen corrected. "It saved the galaxy. From you, from us, from anyone who thinks they have all the answers. The universe is too big and too strange for any one species to rule it all. As Kethvin departed, Chen reflected on the war that had changed everything. Humanity had entered the galactic stage not as conquerors or diplomats, but as chaos agents, and somehow that had been exactly what the galaxy needed. The Outer Rim was peaceful now, patrolled by mixed species crews who understood that strength came not from dominance, but from diversity. Children who had never known the Korathani yoke grew up free to make their own choices, their own mistakes, their own futures. And somewhere in the void between stars, the scattered remnants of the Korathani Empire wandered, learning slowly that perfection was an illusion, and that perhaps chaos wasn't weakness after all. But humanity? Humanity kept being human, chaotic, unpredictable, irrational, and free. They explored new worlds, started new colonies, and continued to confuse anyone who tried to understand them completely. Because that's what humans do. They adapt, they survive, and they never, ever stop being gloriously, magnificently unpredictable. The galaxy was vast and full of wonders yet to be discovered, and somewhere out there, new threats would emerge, new challenges would arise, new enemies would test the resolve of free species everywhere. When that day came, they would face it as they always had, together, chaotic, and completely, utterly human. After all, the first rule of galactic survival is simple. Never underestimate the species that turn chaos into victory, disorder into strength, and stubbornness into salvation. The Korathani had learned that lesson too late. The galaxy would remember it forever.